Eat high quality food without breaking the bank. 5 tips to help make it happen.
An important fact about frugal living is that you're not giving up everything that you love. Part of it is figuring out ways that you can have those things, maybe in smaller amounts, and doing it very carefully.
Well, that's what this video is all about. We encourage you to stick with us because we're going to give you the ways that we have found to help make that happen for us. But if you don't know us, I'm Hope.
And I'm Larry.
This is Under the Median, where every week we talk about practical frugality. The first tip is absolutely our favorite thing in the whole wide world. That is, look for locally owned ethnic markets. We have a favorite.
Oh, we really do. The owner of this particular ethnic market in our town, and that's called the Mediterranean Mart, he is wonderful. He is a great guy. He's really good friends with Hope because Hope has been in there so much that he just smiles and waves to her whenever she walks in. He's able to find some really good deals on some produce, maybe that they got in extra or something that they have in special that he can give to her, and he'll make sure she gets a good amount of it too, a pretty good quantity of that item.
One of the advantages of shopping this way is usually when you are talking to someone, you're probably talking to the owner,
Yes.
which means he or she has the ability to say, wait a minute, I just got this in and I think you're really going to like it. One of the things that you have to remember is, so these specialty markets are going to have items that you generally can't find anywhere else. For us, that means being able to find a flatbread that they bring in fresh from the markets of Chicago every single week for a really great price. I think this was like $2.50 for this flatbread, and he has lots of different sizes and shapes of flatbread. This is an example of something that we picked up today. This was half price because he had quite a bit of it. These are just roasted chickpeas with a little bit of salt on them, but the whole bag was $2.
The store is very nicely laid out, and as you can see, everything's stacked very neatly on shelves. There's certain categories for items, so you can go and find the item that you're looking for very quickly. All the spices are together, for instance. All the refrigerated goods, of course, are in the freezer, and they're all together.
You're going to find a variety of things like specialty olives, tahini, best prices in town, and that is what you're going to find at a lot of ethnic stores, is these specialty items that are significantly lower than what you're seeing in the traditional grocery stores. I always get my tahini from Said. So watch locally owned ethnic markets, guys. Tip number 2 is contact the company. If there's a specialty item that you really, really enjoy, look for the company online, find that contact button, click on it, and tell them. Spill the tea. Tell them exactly what you like about their product. Oftentimes that company will not only respond and say, thank you so much, we're so glad you enjoy our products. They will send you several high value coupons in return for your opinion. And in fact, if you ask them, they will tell you how often they reissue new coupons and what the process is for getting a new batch of coupons. I have a friend who has done this. She probably has 8 or 10 companies that she regularly contacts, and she gets high value coupons. Some of them are for free products, and simply by calling and asking the companies or contacting them and saying, you do coupons? How often? And how do I get them?
Now, if you're looking for additional ways to save money on groceries, grab our free guide filled with all kinds of ways that you can cut your grocery bill.
We'll make sure there's a link, guys, in the description of this video for that free resource. Tip number 3, simply use the ingredient less often. None of us likes to hear this, but really when it's an expensive ingredient, simply make it a special occasion when you're using the ingredient and use less of it. Some of us forget that things like high quality cheeses, and you know what I'm talking about, don't you? The flavor, it's so incredible that you don't need a whole lot of that cheese in order to get that sensation that you know you're going to get from eating that cheese. Use it, buy it, use it less often, and use less of the ingredient.
Premium oils and fresh herbs are a couple more examples of items that you can use less of that are kind of expensive. What are some of the things that you do to cut down your costs? Leave a comment in the comment field.
Here are a couple more tips before we move on to our next point, and that is that with things like fresh herbs, they can be a little more expensive perhaps than buying the dried variety. But if you will wait until the very end of the recipe and cut up a few additional leaves of those fresh herbs and put them on top, then the essential oils from those herbs, it absolutely permeates that recipe at the very last minute, and it gives you far more flavor than if you've cooked it in that recipe for a certain length of time. So save a few leaves and put them on at the very last minute, and you'll still get that flavor. In fact, it will be intensified.
Hope touched on this point. Make sure that you're using items for just special occasions. That way you're not using them very often, and they will be very special to you and your guests.
We have friends who are Italian, and they may make their mama's bolognese sauce for us. They're not going to tell us exactly what's in it. They absolutely are not. They may make it, but when they make that bolognese sauce, it takes a little while to make, and they're going to make it for special occasions.
Yeah.
The same thing if you think in terms of like the stollen that you're going to get for Christmas, or the king cake that you're going to make right before Mardi Gras. They have some pretty expensive ingredients in it. And you may find that if you're making it for special occasions, please, 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 please get your kids in the kitchen. Teach your kids, because oftentimes we find that if we're making it for special occasions, it's because it's something amazing that is associated with our heritage, and you want to pass that on to the next generation. So not only should you make it, you should get your kids in the kitchen helping you make it.
When these items are used sparingly, it takes a meal and makes it into a very special meal. Another strategy that you can employ is to use and find a substitute ingredient to put in place of that expensive one.
I have played around with this a lot, and we have some examples for you of lower cost substitutions that we have come up with. Saffron. Oh my goodness. It's expensive, and it's really that color, that vibrant yellow color of saffron. It's beautiful, but oh boy, oh Nelly, is it expensive. I've played around with using some turmeric instead of saffron to get the yellow color. Yes, the flavor isn't going to be exactly the same, but that vibrant color, you can kind of get it by substituting some turmeric.
White wine is another item that you can substitute. You can use grape juice or apple juice instead of that, and it adds a lot of flavor, and chances are you won't miss it in the finished dish.
It's not exactly the same, and we totally get that, but it is a much lower cost substitute. The other thing that you can do is maybe substitute some broth or some stock instead of the wine, and that also is going to give you an alternative. It's going to give that smooth, satiny finish to your sauces that you would expect while you're using white wine, but you're using something less expensive.
So the texture won't be changed
Exactly.
a great deal.
Is cream in your favorite recipe? Let's talk about some substitutions. Greek yogurt is a really good substitution.
Yeah.
You can also use some flour with a little bit of thickener. That is not, I don't think, quite as good. It's going to give you the finished consistency, but not that flavor of the cream. Here's something that I have found that really does mimic cream, and of course, we're dairy-free, so this kind of makes sense. Coconut milk. Coconut milk is higher fat content than the other plant-based milks, and it's thicker because of that fat content. I use it all the time in finishing soups, pureed soups that have that cream finish to them. I use coconut milk all the time, and it does give that kind of rich flavor to those soups. You can also just use some plain milk, and then you could add a little bit of butter to the finished sauce, and it's going to add that fat, and it's going to give you a little bit more of that flavor.
A good substitute for chicken breasts are simply chicken thighs. Those are much cheaper. In fact, I noticed the thighs and the legs will oftentimes come in a pack together, and they're a lot cheaper than getting the breasts.
Ground beef. Add half ground beef, half lentils, or just add half the ground beef to whatever you're making. You probably won't notice the difference. You can add lentils in there, or you can just add all lentils and substitute the lentils and leave the meat out. Which, of course, we're plant-based, so we leave the meat out altogether. But we weren't always plant-based, guys. And a lot of these tips I'm giving you, we weren't plant-based until 10 or 12 years ago. So all the time before that, I did cook with meat, and these are some of the real substitutions that I came up with in order to use the basic ingredients that were expected in a recipe and substitute some other things that gave me the whole idea and the feel and the flavor, the mouth feel of that finished recipe without all the added cost of the very expensive ingredients.
Sixth major point in our savings is to make it from scratch. If you make your dish from scratch, you can save so much more money than if you buy the entire thing in a package at the store.
I used to make all kinds of fancy breads, braided breads. I was totally into it. It's the artistic element that really got me. But like Christmas, we mentioned the Christmas stollen before.
Yeah.
You can make those sorts of breads from scratch. King cake for Mardi Gras. I don't know if any of you have made king cake for Mardi Gras, but it's very fun cake. I've made it from scratch. In fact, I was teaching a group of junior high students one year, and I was teaching about Louisiana, and I made king cake and took it in for them. They're like, Mrs. Ware, this is really good. I'm like, it's got 2 sticks of butter in it. That's why it's really good.
That's why you like it.
But making it from scratch, there were a few kind of expensive ingredients, but it was not nearly as expensive as buying it from the grocery store. Because when you're buying it from the grocery store, they may show up as specialty items around that time of the year that one would expect to see them, but they're going to be pretty expensive because they're not making huge quantities of that item.
Our next strategy is to go to the source, and that is just a matter of cutting out the middleman. You can go directly to the farmer, directly to the farmer's market, and purchase these items.
You can, for instance, join a food co-op where you are purchasing from large manufacturers and you're going directly from the manufacturer to the customer, and that does cut out the middleman. But another great example, of course, is going to local farmers or local apiaries if you're looking for honey. Whatever you're looking for, find it and source it local. Then not only are you supporting a small local business, but you may very well be getting a discount, especially if you're able to buy in bulk. Great example. Years ago, this was probably 25 years ago, we used to buy gallon jars of honey. Yeah, because we didn't really use refined sugar. We used honey instead.
Right.
And it was us and about a dozen other homeschooling families.
Yeah.
And one mom would take all the seats out of her minivan and we would contact the apiary and make this huge bulk order, and they would meet like at this wayside table or something halfway between the farm, the bee farm, and the city, and they would pull up. She'd open the back of the doors of the van and they'd put all the honey in there, and she would hand him all this cash that she had collected from all of the homeschool families. Then she'd bring it back to town and we would all go collect our gallon jars of honey and thank her appropriately for doing all the running for us and collecting everything. That's just an example of when you gather together with other like-minded people who also want to buy the same ingredients. Sometimes you can get a great deal if you're willing to go together as a group and make one order.
This strategy not only reduces your grocery bill, but it also gets you hooked up with good network suppliers. You'll get a good supply to get these items much cheaper.
Now, if feeding your family nutritious food without breaking the bank is important to you, there are certain aisles of the grocery store that maybe you just don't even want to walk down. There are certain foods in the grocery store that maybe you just don't even want to buy.
Yes.
I walked you through a grocery store recently in a video and showed you 30 different items that you shouldn't buy, and if you don't buy them, they're going to cut your grocery bill in half. That video is right over there. 5 tips. Well, I'm going to try that again. I'm like,
tie her hands up and she can't talk.
It's absolutely true.